How about 60 Saints for Boys by Joan Wyndham? I'm going to start with St. James. All that we really know about St. James we can find in the Bible, but that isn't very much. However, there are a good many stories that people have told each other right from the time he lived, and other stories are written in books. Some of these may quite well be true. After our Lord's Ascension, the apostles went about teaching people how to be Christians, and James went to Spain. He was there a long time, and he saw Our Lady there. So after years and years, when he at last died, his friends took his body back to Spain, and it was buried at a town called Compostella. Well, as soon as people heard about it, they began to make pilgrimages to Compostela. A pilgrimage is a journey to some blessed or holy place. People make pilgrimages to Jerusalem and Nazareth and Bethlehem and Lourdes and Compostela and Walsingham and other places. Now, when the people prayed at Compostela, St. James often used to see them and talk to them. Of course, he had to come from heaven to do this, but God allowed him to come. And so more and more people went to Compostela to ask St. James to pray for them and the things that they needed. And he did. And because he is a particular friend of God's, people were cured of illnesses and their prayers were answered time and time again. One day, a German man and his wife and son had asked St. James to pray for a house for them, because they were living in a shed. They had waited and looked everywhere for a house. Well, that very week they found the very house they wanted. They were so pleased that they said they would make a pilgrimage to Compostela to say thank you. Wouldn't it be grand, said the wife, whose name was Greta, if we saw St. James himself and could thank him properly? And they started off. They were very poor, and so they walked. They carried as little as possible, but it came to a good deal, even so. Greta carried a saucepan and some packages of food and soap, as well as her rug and cup and knife and plate. Hans carried an axe to cut firewood, some sort of matches, and some snares to catch rabbits, and dry clothes for all of them, as well as his rug and cup and knife and plate. Adolf carried some tools and bits of leather to mend their shoes and an extra bag of flour, as well as his rug and cup and knife and plate. They couldn't really do with much less. When it rained, they stayed the night at an inn. The inns were called different names: the George's and the Dragon, the White Hart, the Seven Stars, the Leather Bottle, and Bird in Hand. What is the name of the inn nearest to your house? Well, one wet evening, Hans and Greta and Adolf were tiredly walking along, looking for somewhere to stay the night, when they saw an inn called the Horse and Groom. There, said Adolf, let's go there. It looks cheery and warm, and we haven't stayed at an inn called the Horse and Groom. So they went in and took off their wet things and had a hot supper and hot wine with spices in it so they wouldn't catch colds. But the innkeeper was a wicked man and hated pilgrims because they never had much money to spend in his inn. So when Hans and Greta and Adolf were all asleep in the warm and dry, he took a silver cup and he hid it in Adolf's baggage and went quietly away. Directly after breakfast, they said goodbye and thank you for the warm, comfortable night to the innkeeper and set off again. But they hadn't gone far when some policemen galloped after them and told them to stop. Why? Said Hans. Because the innkeeper of the Horse and Groom says one of you has stolen a valuable silver cup, said the head policeman. One of us has? Said Greta in an astonished voice. Of course we haven't. We are pilgrims going to Compostela, not thieves. Well, then you won't mind if we look in your bags, just to make sure, said the policeman. No, of course we don't mind, said Hans. Which baggage? All of it, said the policeman. Luckily, it was a fine day after the rain, and Greta unpacked her baggage, and the policeman searched it. Nothing there, madam, he said. Thank you, said Greta, and she began to pack again. Now yours, said the policeman to Hans. Nothing there either. Thank you, said Hans, and he began to pack again. Now yours, my lad, said the policeman to Adolf. Hey, he said, what have we here? And he pulled out the silver cup. So you are thieves, and the innkeeper is right. It didn't matter what Hans and Greta and Adolf said, and the next morning Adolf was hanged up on a tree with a rope around his neck, and all their goods and chattel were given to the innkeeper to console him. Hans and Greta went sadly on to Compostela, where they told St. James what had happened and thanked him for finding them the house, but they didn't see him. On their way home, Hans said he wanted to go and see the tree where Adolf was hanging, and when they got there, Adolf was still there. But when they stood and cried sadly, Adolf said, Don't cry, Mother and Father. I'm quite all right, and I was waiting for you to come. St. James has been here all the time and has fed me and cheered me up. Hans was so astonished that he ran to the town to find the judge, but Greta stayed with Adolf. The judge was just going to have dinner. He was going to have roast chicken and bread sauce and Brussels sprouts and chipped potatoes. And because he was going to have 2 whole chickens, he was only going to have a little fruit afterwards. There were melons and oranges and apples and strawberries and bananas and William pears for him to choose. When Hans rushed into his house, he put down his carving knife and said, "What's all this?" "Adolf isn't dead at all," said Hans, all out of breath with having run so fast. "Nonsense," said the judge, who luckily remembered about Adolf. "He was hanging 36 days ago." "But he's alive," said Hans. "He talked to me." "He's no more alive than the roast chickens are," said the judge. And an extraordinary thing happened. The chickens got up off their dish, in the feathers and all, and the cock began to crow, and the hen began to cluck. "Well," said the judge, staring at the chickens. "Well, I say." "Come and see Adolf quickly," said Hans, who was so excited about his son that he scarcely noticed the miracle of the chickens. The judge went with Hans, and a whole crowd of people followed them, and they found Adolf listening to Greta while she told him what they had done at Compostella. So Hans and Greta and Adolf happily went home, but the judge sent the police to catch the innkeeper and hanged him instead. Ooh. St. James's special day is on July 25th, and people called Hamish or Jacob or Jack can all have them for their saints because they are one and the same name. The end.